man may look like many other residences of Vancouver, only Bindi Johal was one of Canada's most notorious gangsters. But this was no secret double life. Bindi's career as a criminal was a very public affair, and one that ended in bloodshed on a nightclub dance floor. Today, the name Bindi Johal is one of legend to the underworld, but back in the 1990s, his reign brought fear and terror to the streets. Get yourself ready for the shocking case of the notorious South Asian gangster who ruled the street of Canada in the 90s.
Are you worried about your safety in India?
I never worry about my safety. My safety is no problem.
And what about the shootings last night?
Just move the camera, or you might have to worry about your safety.
Hey, get that thing out of the face, or I'll rip it right off your head. I don't give a okay? Keep the thing away.
As 300 people enjoy their night in Vancouver, they would have no idea of the horror they were about to witness. 27-year-old Bindi Johal was something of a celebrity, but for all the wrong reasons. As Johal was happily dancing the night away, he was approached by a gunman and shot from behind. As confusion filled the nightclub, the shooter managed to escape, and Johal was left bleeding on the dance floor.
Bindi Johal was shot in the back of the head on the Palladium nightclub dance floor. He was 27.
He was rushed to the hospital, but despite the best efforts of the medics, he succumbed to his injuries and died 4 hours after the bullets were fired. Even with hundreds of people present that fatal night, not one witness could describe the assailant who opened fire. Only months before the shooting, 3 of Johal's associates were also killed, bringing a bloody war to Vancouver like nothing the city has ever seen. But just how did this Indian immigrant become one of the most dangerous men in Canada? His story is a roller coaster of violence, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder.
He isn't affiliated with any gangs, but he's no stranger to police or the public. In court, Bindi Johal admitted to being a drug dealer. He was tried for the murder of 2 of his former friends. He was acquitted. Police continue to keep an eye on Mr. Johal.
Punjab, India, 1975. Johal was only 4 years old when his parents uprooted themselves from their home and moved to Vancouver, British Columbia. From an early age, it was clear that Johal had a problem with authority and generally showed a lack of respect for anyone. He soon became a problem child, and even his teachers raised concerns about his behavior and lack of remorse for his own actions. At only 18 years old, he was sentenced to 60 days prison time for the brutal assault of his school's vice principal. So severe was the attack that his victim spent considerable time recovering from his injuries. He was expelled immediately, but did not accept responsibility, and even tried to blame society as a whole. According to Johal, he was the victim of a bigoted society that did not accept his Indo-Canadian heritage, and this was the reason he lashed out so violently. During his trial, the judge rejected his claims and saw no signs of prejudice from Johal's victim, giving him no excuses to pick his vice principal as his victim. The time he spent in jail, however, did not teach him a lesson, and after his release, it would not be long before he once again found himself before a judge. Johal enrolled in McNair Secondary School after moving to Richmond. It was here that his troubles continued, and his path to a life of crime would begin. Shortly after arriving, he was convicted of possession of a deadly weapon after smashing a car window with a baseball bat. He did enroll into college, but after the first semester, he dropped out to pursue his new life, a career criminal. He would join a local crew of Hispanic gangsters known as the Los Diablos, and before long, the Indo-Canadian members would increase until eventually, the gang underwent a name change. Now known as the Punjabi Mafia, Johal's role in this empire would be hitman. He would work for Jimmy and Ron Dosanjh, 2 men who would become a bigger part of Johal's life than anyone could have imagined. By 1991, he had found an opportunity to step up his criminal activity after Jimmy Dosanjh was charged for the murder of a local narcotics trafficker. He would take the Punjabi Mafia into a new direction, hijacking electronics trucks to sell their precious cargo on the black market. By this point, it was estimated Johal was bringing in around $4 million annually. But his biggest problem, and his eventual undoing, would be his temper and disregard for anyone else, including his own gang members. One police officer had described his attitude to others, even those he had known for years, as all he was concerned about was himself. He was very narcissistic in nature and had a general hatred of people. Bindi actually met Bal Buttar, one of his close associates, in prison when he was in his 20s. They never knew each other growing up, and from Bal's statements, Bindi made it very clear that they were not friends, but business partners, as he did with everyone else in his group. Bal Buttar was a lieutenant of Johal at the time, and claimed the Punjabi Mafia had been responsible for over a dozen murders across the nation. Buttar would also admit to carrying out several executions side by side with his boss, in a sick and twisted disregard for human life. Not all his assassination attempts were successful, such as the case of Johal's associate and former brother-in-law, Preet Sarbit Peter Gill. As if killing his own brother-in-law wasn't enough, his next target would be a member of his very own family. Buttar described the planned murder